Hello everybody and welcome to today's Kerbal Space Program video. In this video I will be explaining the secrets of the Spacedust mod and its mechanics. So starting with an explanation of what the mod adds. Most of you will probably have it installed as part of Far Future Technologies and won't realise that this is actually a separate mod. But Spacedust adds resources inside the atmospheres of planets and gas giants, along with resources inside in space around the celestial objects. Spacedust also adds parts designed to find and extract these resources. So, beginning with our first part, this absolutely minuscule trace gas analyzer, which is in the science tab for those of you who do not know. Also, the reason why my science tab is so tiny is because I've used the janitor's closet mod to filter out the mods that are not relevant to this tutorial. Or rather, call it parts not relevant to this tutorial, but moving on. Trace gas analyzing. It's a part that allows certain resources to be discovered and identified. Now, if it's a Spacedust compatible scanner, I'll have this window, part window, I think it's called, which has Spacedust scanner, and then in this, under detectable resources, you get a list of all resources that the part can find, along with the discovery range and the identification range. As this part is earlier in the game than the rest of the parts that I'm showing, it has a discovery and identification range of local, which I'm not sure how much that actually is, but I am sure that it's not very much. Basically, it allows all these gases and other similar resources to be found within the planet within a certain range of the detector. Moving on to its direct upgrade, the spectrographic gas scanner. This is a much larger component with a higher electricity consumption, but it has a much higher discovery and identification ranges, and this time we have actual numbers, so it's fairly straightforward to say that the discovery range will usually be significantly larger than the identification range. And to clarify, to discover a resource means that you've found that it is there, but you don't know what it actually is. Identifying that resource tells you what type of resource it actually is. Identification, as you probably guess, is just as important as discovery, since it actually tells you what you're going to get. So you can find quite a lot of resources actually in this part, and then also on my little demonstration truss structure, it is this part right here. As you can see, pretty small again. Especially considering that this truss is about the same size as a Mark 1 tank. Now moving on to this part's direct upgrade. Now we're getting into parts added by Far Future Technologies using Spacedust components as the framework. The chroma imaging spectrometer. It's more massive, but better in every other possible way. In particular, it has 5 times the identification radius and a discovery radius massively larger than what the simple looker can do. It also discovers extra resources like liquid hydrogen, liquid helium-3 and liquid deuterium that are not mentioned at all within the looker's discovery list. The liquid hydrogen detector is particularly impressive as it discovers everything in the sphere of influence. Anyway, moving on to this large part here, the gamma ray spectrometer, and as some of you might have guessed, this part is an antimatter detector. It will discover all the antimatter inside the host object sphere influence, but identifies it within 100 kilometers. It's actually the same identification range as the spectrographic gas scanner that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so between those four parts, yes, I should mention that the gamma ray spectrometer has two variants depending on which one you prefer. It's got this bare variant, which is the default, and this shielded one, which I think works better if you're actually sticking on top of something you're launching off an atmosphere, but if I'm generally putting on a rocket, I prefer the bare variant because I like the more complex and bare bones look of it. It's purely personal preference and doesn't actually change in any way at all the function of the part. Okay, moving on to the extraction parts, which are actually going to be getting your resources for you. There are 7 parts in my tab, well, correction, 8 parts. But only 4 of them are from Spacedust or use the Spacedust systems, so I'll only be covering those. First of all, from the Spacedust mod itself, the Siftatron 125. This tiny little part is a very small and easy to integrate component for actual extraction of resources. As you can tell, it can extract quite a few resources at varying degrees of efficiency. Also, when it talks about efficiency, what it's really talking about is the amount per second that you get. It doesn't actually cost more energy to get more out instantaneously. And if I turn it on, then you can see that this fan starts whirring, which is a pretty nice and subtle detail. Okay, it's also worth mentioning this whole thermal parameters thing, because the Spacedust parts use the system heat method of heating, which is system heat is a dependency of far future technology, so you probably just have it bundled anyway. But if you press this fire icon here, then it will show all the heating loops of the parts. I'll explain the others later, but yes, the Siftatron 125 has 2 variants. It has this inline and this compact one. The only difference is that these stack nodes for putting it in a tower are removed. This is better if you want to put it on like a truss or just stick it out somewhere. Now moving on to the Siftatron 250, this is essentially the 125's big brother, as it produces more heat and it needs more power, but it has slightly higher efficiency for specific resources. Again, it uses system heat modules. The fans are much larger this time, and it's actually easier to see the animation. that's really clean. A cut, like, yeah. Yep, it extracts exactly the same resources as its smaller counterpart, but it extracts most of them at a higher efficiency, at least when efficiency isn't 100% already. Also, I don't know why it can extract rocks out of the atmosphere. That feels a bit off to me, but never mind. Anyway, just like the smaller one, there are two variants: the inline one, which is the default, and then the compact one. I personally prefer the inline one because that means it's easier to integrate it with stacking. Anyway, now it's time to move on to the far future parts. Let me just move this out of the way for the sake of it. First of all, we have this PK Atmo Hoover Atmospheric Ram Scoop. Again, this is similar to the Siftertrons, but whereas the Siftertrons are really designed for surface bases, the Atmospheric Ram Scoop, as it's admittedly very easy to tell, is designed to be used on space planes, and large ones at that, as this is a 2.5 meter diameter component. It harvests quite a few more resources than what the Siftertron can take. Of particular importance, it can harvest liquid hydrogen, liquid helium-3, and liquid deuterium. These resources alone make to be honest, the other resources don't even matter as much compared to the value offered by the hydrogen, and in particular helium-3 and deuterium make it worthwhile, as those are your fusion fuels for those who are familiar with far future technologies or similar mods will probably already be aware of this, but those are the fusion fuels needed for your advanced spacecraft using engines like Daedalus drives and Z-Binge fusion engines and other such engines. But yes, the Ram Scoop also comes with different variants that have different performances. The performance is measured in terms of the mass of the part and the area of the intake. Like the default shock cone has the smallest intake area, but it works efficiently at any speed. This again matches the real life behaviour of shock cone intakes. Again, with the RAM intake, it displays a similar trend. It has a significantly larger intake, but it works best at multiple times the speed of sound. As for the circular intake, this is a subsonic harvester, which will really be more compatible with some enormous trawler type design, designed to just fly slowly through the atmosphere of a planet like, let's say, Eve, and extract resources. It has the largest area, but also the highest mass and cost of the parts, which is, again, another bit like the intakes are mostly similar, but I personally tend to favour the RAM intake because in the SSTs I've used it on, they tend to be flying fast enough to make the RAM intake worthwhile. Anyway, let's revert to the default and move on to the final part of this tutorial, the Buzzard Particle Scoop. Now I'm going to clarify the most important point about this. This part allows you to extract antimatter from apparently empty space. use a vessel with the gamma ray spectrometer, as which I'm highlighting, to find the antimatter. But then the particle scoop is what you'll be using to actually collect it. It's worth noting that it also has two variants, but the only difference is that the inline variant adds a node to the top, which would allow you to put, for example, an aerodynamic nose cone or perhaps a command pod. But personally, I don't really. In most designs that actually use this part, you're going to want to leave the front open. And again, it works similarly to other Spacedust components that uses the system heat, radiate thermal mechanics, and also yes, let me show you what the ram scoop looks like when it's actually extracting resources. And you can see these panels open up, which I'm fairly sure are for discarding of excess resources. But yes, it's a fairly easy visual indicator of whether or not the intake is actually harvesting resources. The particle scoop has a similar visual animation, but which in my opinion looks like a lot cooler. Instead of just displaying some flaps, it unfolds this structure, and now I'm just going to up it so you can see the whole thing all at once. This particle scoop often gets used in conjunction with interstellar spacecraft designs, partly because of its function as a resource extractor, and partly because it's a realistic and awesome looking part. Anyway, as you can see from the fuel efficiencies panel I'm bringing up, it has pretty much all the same efficiencies as the ram scoop. Although I do notice that the liquid methane efficiency as well as the liquid ammonia ones are down, but the rest are the same. Now, admittedly it's not quite, if all the efficiency is the same, there's a problem that makes the particle scoop less effective than the Hoover atmospheric ram scoop for actually getting the resources, and the problem is that the particle scoop is an exospheric harvester designed to operate in a vacuum. In vacuums, most of all resources you can actually find are at incredibly low densities. So therefore it'll take you absolutely ages for this particle scoop to actually work. Another drawback of the particle scoop, which to be honest also applies to the Hoover atmospheric ram scoop, is that you have to be facing pretty close to prograde in order for the parts to function. Now, for facing prograde consistently in space, you can either use the better time warp mod to increase your physics time warp to ridiculous levels, just to speed up the process, because any resource worth extracting from space using the particle scoop is going to take a while to extract, which therefore means that you'll need some sort of time warp enhancing mod, such as better time warp to increase your physics time warp to, I think you can get up to like 100 times physics time warp, and also the persistent thrust mod, which also allows you to select a target node. For in this example, we want to select prograde, and then always face prograde when doing on-rails time warp, which basically allows you to go up to like 100,000 times on-rails time warp and still harvest the resources. I personally would go for the persistent thrust mod, but it is incredibly janky. In particular, it's worst feature, in my opinion, is that it disables any type of time warp for vessels between 300 meters and 2,400 meters away from another vessel on the surface. Which is not... yeah, it's really... But anyway, that's how the hurdles work. One of the advantages and disadvantages. Now, I'm going to get rid of this display construction, and I'm going to actually demonstrate the Hoover atmospheric ram scoop on an SSTO space plane, and also show that you don't actually need to discover resources before you can identify them to make them work with Spacedust. Now I'm just going to briefly refresh my memory of the action route I signed. Okay, and then I'm going to demonstrate this SSTO in possibly one of the hardest environments I have got in my game for resource extraction. I will be going to Aneta, a gas giant orbiting the Arauk system, which is included as part of the Calbelon Planetary Paths. Now once the SSTO works, I will just cheat into orbit for the purposes of this demonstration, and then show you exactly how the Spacedust mod really works in practice. If I bring up my chats menu, scroll through this enormous list of planets that I have, which I probably wish there's a better menu for this, but since it's designed for the stock system, then of course there's actually a better menu, because it was designed to work with approximately 5 planets and a couple of moons. Therefore, I am just going to align yes. First of all, let me show you where we are. This is Aneta, a distant gas giant in the Arauk system, orbiting, as you can tell, Calbelon, all the way down here. Okay, moving. I am just going to mess with that bit and then go back around. Here, just to get on a nice daylight side for the majority of the trip. Now, my rule of thumb for deorbiting SSTOs like this into gas giants, based on test, is that you should expend about 2/3 of your orbital velocity as delta V. Okay, so now to activate the engines, these are far-future technologies, Ouroboros, toroidal tokamak fusion engines. I am just going to use persistent thrust to make this burn take a lot less time. Okay, so delta V is running incredibly low, and entry is imminent. Everything is going according to plan. Okay, I'll just speed up a bit more, and there, that should be good enough. Prograde time, or deploy the brakes. Yes, once I've got this line, I'll just be slowly time warping on down. There we go. Okay, I have disabled the harvesting for the moment. But okay, I'm getting down, so now if I right click that, keep it pinned. And if I press action group 2, as you can see, my resource tanks are filling up. Yep, and if I click the part, it's even more obvious that the tanks are filling up. And like, look, just look at that. I'll say the density of the atmosphere in here is so large, it's so immense that you can fill up the tanks pretty much entirely from scrap, from empty. You can just fill these tanks incredibly quickly. It's utterly ridiculous. Right then, so as you can see, okay, G-forces get quite insane this far down in the gas giant, and for future reference, this craft does in fact actually have a probe core and will operate, and would probably operate like mad if it was in real life. However, since there are crew cabins built into the space plane I've just put them in for maintenance purposes, I like to pretend. But yes, there are. Yeah, that's why there comes on, because there are tanks on here that were installed for. There are components in here installed for maintenance. As you can see, this SSTO actually handles rather well inside the atmosphere of the largest gas giant in the Calvin planet pack. And when I say largest, I'm talking about 2.4 times the mass of Joule, which should give you an idea of just how, of course, this design wouldn't work at all if it weren't for the fact that these intakes can fill the ship's tanks faster than the engines can drain them. So I basically have infinite delta V, just like the design for the Buzzard ramjet starship, but that's a topic for another time. So yeah, I think I have fairly obvious point in earlier tests. This SSTO does in fact reach planetary orbit with 1 kilometer per second of delta V left in tanks, and is still almost entirely full of fusion fuel. The main reason it has such a low delta V when the fusion fuel tanks are nearly full is because I have way more fusion fuel than the engines can actually use. So the limiting factor here is in fact the hydrogen. I just want to demonstrate this cool thing I've got. As you can see, I have raster clock monitor with some cameras installed which give me some really nice looking camera angles for my starships. Yeah, this is one of the maintenance modules I was talking about. In reality, there'd only be Kerbals in here when maintenance checks are being performed. Alright, I may have skipped past that briefly, but I do have a mod which gives me a mission control style IVA for probe calls. It works on most of them as well, actually. It doesn't always work. Anyway, so yeah, this has been my Spacedust tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a like, maybe even consider subscribing, and I always ask for this, but please leave a comment. I really want to know your thoughts about my video, or perhaps future videos, or ideas, or just anything else. Please leave your comments down below in the comment section. I feel like I say this every time, I never get the amount of comments I want, but that's neither here nor there. So anyway, goodbye, and see you in the next one.